great chat. Tom from Ecoscope and Colleen from RDA. One thing I found really interesting when you were talking, I really appreciate you staying back after the show, by the way, is this idea that you can have a research marine centre alongside this new lithium valley and a harbour, and I'm going, are these guys going to butt heads, or how do you actually see them working together? Because if it did, I can see a massive benefit, but what do you see the challenges of two that almost people would say, well, they're on the opposite sides of the pole?
In my experience, the most successful environmental programs, from the Peel Harvey to the Swan Canyon to elsewhere, other regional areas in WA, is when, believe it or not, environmental interests and industrial interests work as partners. Now, to be able to do that, because ultimately they can be very much in conflict, but to do that is also to find the common ground, and it takes a certain dynamic in the environment portfolio and a certain dynamic in the industrial portfolio to be able to have that partnership. In fact, actually, most people with industrial interests have the same interest to utilize or appreciate and love the environment, as do, say, the environmental interests on the other side, so to speak. So there's more common ground than people realize. It's the history of development that seems to have stained and given a negative negative thoughts. It's almost like blame industry for everything. And you know what? They are to blame. Not that we are as consumers as well, but industry. So to get away from that dialectic, that thinking, is to look at how can we use each other as partners to come to a common good. If Lithium Valley happens, and I sure hope it does, to make that successful, it will want least roadblocks in its way. One of the roadblocks it can remove by strategic thinking and strategic investment that doesn't go to the detriment of the business plan or to the various industries that want to make money out of it, is to invest in such a program. The Marine Institute, on its part, is not going to want to kill the goose that's laying the golden egg, so to speak, but it also has to realize that it wants the goose and the hawk to live together. And so how are you going to get, this is a terrible analogy, my apology. I get accused all the time of mixed metaphors and terrible analogies, but run with me on this one. I'm just, so you have to, there has to be caution, care, and dynamic diplomacy between both those interests. But in fact, they won't be in conflict very much, because the Marine Institute will in fact be investing, hopefully, before large-scale developments occur, so that the system's starting to rebuild before the development comes in. My idea of investing in Coburn Sound works best if we can get started maybe 3 to 5 years before the port actually starts to get built. So you lay these things in the ground.
And I think with that, there is an increased interest globally of ethical investment, so people want to invest in companies or buy products from companies that are doing the right thing. So that would actually go to that.
Yeah, you're spot on with that.
Yeah. Colleen, on this show, you've actually interviewed quite a few people from the Coburn area and the Kwinana Industries Council down there. In your discussions, apart from just being on air, but when you actually work with these people, are they actually talking this type of language? Are they actually talking about we need also to be looking at this marine environment and partnering with marine sustainability as well?
I think there's a lot of ideas being thrown around, and I do know that Westport, which is the government's initiative to look at a whole range of these things, they've got one section that's looking specifically at the environment. And hopefully they've got another year in their planning, to come up, with a way forward and how we do that. The more that people put this on the table and discuss it, I think the bigger the conversation is going to be. We also have the Western Harbors Alliance, who we've had in here, and from a community perspective, I think they can put this on the table and into these conversations.
One thing I do, when I was listening to you and my picture went to all the marine biologists and they all jump over to the Great Barrier Reef on the other side of this great country of ours, and I'm looking at this and going, geez, now you're going to have this great big harbour, Do you think it would excite them enough for overseas people to want to actually come here and partake? Because I can see that as a huge job and a huge putting WA on the map. It's something exciting. Would you think it would excite them? Do you think they'd want to take part in something so challenging?
Very much so. How do I call it? In my opinion, the balance of attention in the world is shifting away, in a sense, from a northern hemispheric, perhaps Eastern Australia-ish perspective, to begin to realize that the Indian Ocean and its beautiful coastline with all the different cultures and different environments, and it's a more exotic, least appreciated, or now seen as a new exotic destination and so on. Plus the Indian Ocean is we have India, we have Southeast Asian economies there, you have Africa, you have Middle East access and things like that. The dynamic is changing such that if you look at restoration in the world now, it's basically, how do they do it? What are they doing in Chesapeake Bay, which is eastern United States, around Washington and that area there? And that's very exciting work, and there's been a lot of excellent work there. Fortunately, the WA institutes, particularly the biologists and stuff like that, the universities, have very strong links to what's going on in Chesapeake. There's exchange of postdocs, there's exchange of lecturers, there's a very, what do you want to call it, brother-sisterly exchange of knowledge and information. The same also goes for some of the efforts that have been done in England and to Europe. So we're well positioned to be able to make instant inroads with the other, and also I might mention South Africa, with these other areas of expertise and experience in restoration. The point being, if we get something like that established here, there are spin-offs, for example. I don't know how Ningaloo is going to weather climate change and a warming, upwelling kind of aspect to its part around Exmouth. And I'm bastardizing what can be somewhat complex oceanography around that area, at least to me as a non-oceanographer. But I do appreciate the Ningaloo Reef and so on as a huge coral reef ecosystem in Exmouth Bay and around. So we can attract a lot of these people to come here, particularly to set up a well-funded, hard-nosed, strategic restoration resilience marine institute. When I say hard-nosed, we're not talking about just feather-bedding obtuse academia. This would be, and I have a lot of respect for that because we do need to know that, but it would be to invest in putting acreage down, putting hectares down of seagrass, establishing effective food chains that are actually supporting a certain standing crop of fish and stuff. These biological terms and stuff like that, which I'm not trying to throw in, but to say we can do that. And if we do that, we will just by good communication effort and exchange of ideas attract the world's best here.
Colleen, from Regional Development Australia, and you're in the Perth area, do you find that this type of industry, and I'll call it industry because it's going to be marine, it's going to be research, the amount of jobs, is this going to be an area that RDA would like also to explore? Is that when you get people like Tom on to explore this and start opening up and show us the new opportunities, new industries and new job opportunities for our people here in West Australia?
Yes, RDA would be very interested in that because we do have to manage our environment, but we also do need economic outcomes. So I agree that there could be a good marriage, between the two that would actually highlight a whole bunch of new opportunities. And because we often times, especially in our education systems, pigeonhole education, so you get a large group of people who have studied just one thing, and then, as we found with the mining sector, those jobs went, and we've lost a lot of people, because we haven't diversified the economy, which needs to include the environment, so that all those people who go to school to learn about the environment can actually stay in Western Australia and have a job.
when we look at this and we see the big ships are going to be coming down and you're going to try and grow new seagrass, and you said it was the second largest area for the snapper spawning, do you see that the marine and the environmentalists are going to have to work alongside industry for innovation to be able to make those challenges and overcome the obstacles? Do you see the two merging as like a new industry almost for innovation to actually make this challenge happen?
We're in a period of a long crossroad. It's the only way I can mix my metaphors on that one, in that we have to, WA is a much larger state and much more populous state, and we've experienced rapid change, probably on an order that very few areas have. I would probably argue that, yes, environmentalists are going to have to look at partners where they can to achieve a more strategic outcome. You can fight and you can fight, but and I think there's always legitimacy in fighting things that really people feel are to be fought in a democratic way, I might say. So that's a law-abiding democratic form. But having said that, that there's very few ways that we can progress where we can have an economy where people are employed to be able to have the lifestyles they wish, hopefully a more green, sustainable lifestyle, but also be able to have the industrial economic capacity to have not only a boom capacity to exploit the economy or exploit conditions when it's good for the economy, but to also keep a higher mid-level of more consistent employment with a wider range of skills that aren't just predicated on a mining boom. I think the mining industry has a lot going for it. My personal opinion is I'm getting a little bit tired of holes in the ground, and I believe we can be more clever. We can do holes in the ground, but also fill them in and perhaps get better at how else we can exploit our natural resources in WA. So to me, it has to be a marriage. I don't see, government can never generate the incomes to support such an environmental initiative unless people are prepared to pay more taxes and government can efficiently deliver those tax increases to that environmental outcome. And so industry has to be there in the mix.
One thing, because we are on a major shipping lane, a lot of the ships just go past us and go all the way around to the eastern seaboard to drop off their cargo, and these added hardwares to make them stop here. Does that mean now, and you're talking about external influences, we now have to start talking to the countries that are sending the ships to make sure they're going to meet our environmental objectives here? And what do you see, both of you, the challenges around now starting to involve other people in what we want to achieve?
I think, as I mentioned before, there is, especially from, it's a community born, a greater interest in having ethical businesses, ethical industry. And people are looking to invest in those companies that ethically source resources. And I know this is becoming a conversation. For instance, Tesla, in regards to sourcing their resources, they have to report to the Securities and Exchange Commission on whether or not it's ethical. Okay, so it's a trend, and I think it's going to be a continuing, or a trend that will continue to grow. So I don't think it's, let's just exploit. Let's look after our environment and have a good economic outcome.
Yeah, truly. And I'm not sure the approach is to attract ships here. The thing is, if you generate trade by having a product that can be exported and be competitive internationally, and I believe we can do that with a Lithium Valley train or a chain of value adding to that manufacturing process, as well as other things, and we export them, ships will come to us. And yeah, automatically there are international links as well. But the idea that maybe they're empty boats and you just sing them in there, maybe they'll get a good cheap bale or cargo hold of wheat or iron ore, or in this case, beautifully refined lithium ore, as well as battery casings and new batteries that are even better for the latest techno gadgets that we have, or
The batteries that are driving the ships?
and it could be as well. I would prefer to have ships that are sail-driven, battery-driven, and biogas-driven. But things that all depends that meet the needs of a large international maritime commercial ship.
It seems a really exciting time. You did mention that you would like to see the marine people and the environmental people start this process 3 to 4 years before industry starts. We know that the Outer Harbour is already pushing for it. Is this going to be possible? Because what you're saying is basically should be starting now. And are there groups that are starting now, actually starting to put the footprints on the floor?
Well, I would argue that no, it's not too late, and the process takes very long. Lithium Valley is generating gravitas and speed and awareness, and the concepts are becoming very convincing in my world. So as that generates, there's still quite a lag time. We start now, regardless of how quick things can move. Essentially, development isn't going to happen for another, I would argue, 5 years, because the business studies, the economics, the industrial things, attracting the partners to create the industrial chain or the Lithium Valley chain requires some time and awareness, and they have to, those corporate entities have to make a decision in that regard. It then needs to be carefully coordinated on the WA level to fit together, and then you start your development process. So I'm simplifying and I'm probably destroying what would be the process, but yeah, realistically this won't happen for another 5 to 10 years, and that would be in an expedited fashion, but it certainly would happen in the next 10 to 15.
Right.
If I have it my way.
Do you find that there are people now in the environment, Colleen, that are now starting to put their footprints on that floor and now starting to push and say, well, if this is going to happen, and it's the inevitability of gradualness is how I would phrase it, it is going to happen. Do you find these people are now starting to move in and have these conversations?
I think the new energy future and anything associated with energy metals, I think it's hit us all quite rapidly, and there's a lot of talk. 8 months ago nobody was talking about it. Now everybody's talking about it. You Google it and it's it's everywhere. So I think it's moving at such a speed because the demand. For instance, in Europe, with a number of the countries wanting to divest out of fossil fuels, I think if I'm to believe Facebook, Ireland is the first country that's actually done that. So there's a trend of moving away from these things, but the replacement is going to have to be move much more quickly than our industrialized society has been in the past.
Last question, because I am very conscious of time, and thank you for staying back after the show. But for the die-hard environmentalists who go, absolutely nothing, it shouldn't happen, how can you ever convince me that it won't just destroy everything in a nutshell? Colleen, what would you say to them?
I think our technologies are advanced enough that we can have a great economic future and manage our environment. And I think we all need to move together in that future.
I would say that I do consider myself an environmentalist. Perhaps after what I've just said, might be considered a brown environmentalist, if contradiction terms can be that way. Legitimacy and runs on the ground are what would be required to convince that segment of the community that it can happen without damaging the environment and in fact enhancing the environment. So I would run with that, and lo and behold, because the tide has turned against simple exploitation of the environment now. You can't do that, and if you do, I don't think you as a corporate entity will last very long.
Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for staying back. and Colleen for the YouTube channel.
And thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.